Gerald was not a man who complained without reason. He had survived the fishmonger disaster, lived through the night of 1,000 doors, and watched the city transform from an open courtyard into a fortress of precise architecture. He knocked on Lady Nettia's door with a troubled expression, and she paid attention immediately. "My lady," he said, "I have a problem that nobody else seems to have noticed. Every time I need scrolls from the Royal Scroll Repository, my messages have to leave through the Great Gate, travel the entire World Road, and come back in through the same gate." He paused. "The Royal Scroll Repository, which is owned by the kingdom?" Lady Nettia nodded slowly. "Yes." Gerald stared at her. "So my private trade scrolls are leaving the city, traveling through foreign territories, and coming back, to reach something the kingdom already owns, on the inside." Lady Nettia walked to her window and looked out at the great gate. Gerald was right. She had been so focused on protecting the city from outside threats that she had never asked a simpler question. Why were messages leaving the city at all to reach things that belonged to the kingdom? It was like walking out your front door around the entire block and back through the back gate to reach your own kitchen. She sent her engineers to investigate, and the findings were worse than Gerald had described. It was not just the scroll repository. Messages going to the Royal Ledger Room were leaving the city. Messages going to the Watchtower Archive were leaving the city. Messages going to the Signal Tower were leaving the city. Every time anyone inside the private city needed to reach a royal service, the message went out through the Great Gate, traveled the public World Road, and came back in. Exposed. Slow. Paying World Road courier fees for every single journey to reach buildings the kingdom already owned. This was not a security failure. Nobody had broken in. Nothing had been stolen. But there was something deeply wrong about private trade scrolls traveling through foreign territories to reach the kingdom's own property. The architecture was technically functional, but it was wasteful, exposed, and quietly embarrassing. Lady Nettia summoned her most senior engineer, a quiet, meticulous man named Corridor. She unrolled a new set of blueprints on the table. "I want underground passages," she said. "Private tunnels connecting the city directly to every royal service we own. No Great Gate, no World Road, no foreign territories. Anyone inside this city who needs to reach something the kingdom owns should be able to reach it without ever leaving the city walls." Corridor studied the blueprints for 3 days. Then he returned with a problem. "My lady," he said, "the royal services are not all the same. Some of them, the scroll repository, the ledger room, carry so much traffic they justify a permanent stone tunnel. Built once, carved from bedrock, completely free to use forever. But the others are smaller, more specific, change over time. A stone tunnel to every single service would cost a fortune and take years." He proposed 2 types of corridors instead. The first type was the stone corridor. Permanent, free, but it could only connect to 2 places: the Royal Scroll Repository and the Royal Ledger Room. These were the 2 most heavily used royal services in the kingdom. The volume justified the construction. Nothing else would ever be added to a stone corridor. 2 destinations. That was the rule. The second type was the living corridor, not carved from stone, maintained by a small team of engineers who kept it flexible and adaptable. It could connect to almost any royal service: the Signal Tower, the Messenger Guild, the Watchtower Archive. But unlike the stone corridor, it cost a small gold coin per hour to keep open. The flexibility had a price. Lady Nettia approved both: stone corridors for the scroll repository and the ledger room, the 2 services that everyone used constantly. Living corridors for everything else. Nobody would touch the World Road for kingdom-owned services again. Gerald was the first to test the stone corridor. He sent a request to the scroll repository. The message went underground, and through the private tunnel, arrived at the repository, and then came back with the scrolls, all without ever appearing on the World Road. Gerald timed it: faster, cheaper. His private trade scrolls had not passed through a single foreign territory. He looked at Lady Nettia. "Why did we not build these 6 months ago?" She held his gaze. "Because 6 months ago we were busy keeping spies out." He had no answer to that. The living corridors went up next. Each connected to a different royal service. Each cost its small hourly fee. Nobody complained about the cost. The alternative, sending private messages through foreign territories to reach your own kingdom's buildings, was far worse. Within a month, the volume of traffic leaving through the Great Gate dropped significantly. Most of it had been kingdom-to-kingdom communication that never needed to leave the city in the first place. In AWS, Gerald's problem is real and you will encounter it. By default, when a resource inside your VPC needs to reach an AWS service, S3, DynamoDB, CloudWatch, Secrets Manager, that traffic leaves your VPC, travels over the public internet, and comes back in. Even though these are AWS services, they are reached via public endpoints by default. Your private data travels a public road. The solution is called a VPC endpoint. A VPC endpoint creates a private connection between your VPC and an AWS service entirely within the AWS network. The traffic never touches the public internet. No internet gateway required, no NAT gateway required, no public IP required. The message goes underground through AWS's own private network and arrives at the service directly, like the stone and living corridors. Two types, two different jobs. The stone corridor is called a gateway endpoint, free, permanent, added as a route entry in your subnet's route table, pointing traffic destined for S3 or DynamoDB to the endpoint instead of the internet gateway. Gateway endpoints support exactly two services, S3 and DynamoDB. Nothing else. If a question mentions S3 or DynamoDB and asks how to keep traffic off the public internet, the answer is gateway endpoint. The living corridor is called an interface endpoint. Instead of a route table entry, it creates a private network interface, an ENI, directly inside your subnet with its own private IP address. Traffic to the target service goes to that private IP and travels through AWS PrivateLink to reach the service. Interface endpoints support most other AWS services, SNS, SQS, CloudWatch, Secrets Manager, API Gateway, and many more. Unlike gateway endpoints, interface endpoints cost money, per hour and per gigabyte of data processed. Here's the exam distinction that matters. Gateway endpoint, free, route table only, S3 and DynamoDB only. Interface endpoint, costs money, creates a private IP in your subnet, supports almost everything else. The scenario you will see most often, a Lambda function or EC2 instance in a private subnet with no NAT gateway needs to access S3. The answer is gateway endpoint. Free, no internet required, just a route table entry pointing at the endpoint. If the service is anything other than S3 or DynamoDB, the answer is interface endpoint. The mnemonics. Endpoint equals escape the public road. Gateway equals great 2, S3 and DynamoDB, free. Interface equals it, inserts a private IP and costs money. Stone equals static, 2 services only. Living equals lots of services, flexible, not free. The city now had walls, gates, road signs, checkpoints, bodyguards, a secret courier, watchtowers, and private underground shortcuts to its own kingdom services. Gerald passed Lady Nettia in the corridor one afternoon and said simply, "It works the way it was supposed to." Lady Nettia did not slow her stride. "It always did," she said. "We just had not finished it yet." But far to the east, a new problem was forming. Cloudoria's oldest ally, the Kingdom of Valtoria, needed to share sensitive data regularly. All of it was traveling the public world road. The two kings agreed it was time to connect their kingdoms directly. But the royal architects had 3 laws governing kingdom-to-kingdom connections. Break even 1! And the tunnel could not be built. Episode 8, The Alliance Tunnel,